Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you all for tuning in. New week, but the same goals. No boxing, no life. This week we've got former 140-pound world champion Mario El Azteca Barrios joining us. Also stopping by, PBC Vice President of Communications, Mr. Tim Smith. Two great conversations to be had there. Of course, we'll recap last weekend's action, and in today's toe-to-toe segment, we'll list our 5 breakout candidates of 2022. But let's get back to Mario Barrios for a second. Barrios, of course, will take on Keith Thurman Saturday, February 5th at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas on Fox Sports pay-per-view. Mike, this is a high-stakes welterweight bout between two former world champions. What were your thoughts when it was initially announced?
Well, first, I can't believe that Thurman will have been out of the ring for 2.5 years. But that's where we're at. For that reason, I think Barrios is a good opponent. Barrios is a well-known, proven guy, but not one of the top 147 pounders. Meaning it's a tough fight for sure, but not too tough at least on paper, in his first fight back after such a long layoff. And for Barrios, this is just enormous opportunity. If he wins this fight, and he's capable of doing that, he's instantaneously like a major player in the division. So this is, you mentioned high stakes. This is a big fight for both guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a number of questions ran through my head, like when the fight was first announced. Obviously, how's Mario going to look at 147 pounds? I think that's the big question. Also, is Keith Thurman the same fighter that we saw even against Manny Pacquiao, let alone the guy that we saw back in 2017? I just think this fight is completely unpredictable. Anything can happen, and that's what I want, from my matchups. Now, looking a little bit ahead, who is the ideal opponent for the winner?
Well, Thurman first. If he looks good, if he wins and looks good doing it, I think he's a legitimate candidate to fight one of the title holders. Maybe he fights the winner of Spence Ugas if that fight happens, or he could be a legitimate opponent for Terrence Crawford. I love either of those matchups. I guess we can say the same thing about Barrios, can't we? If he wins this fight, then he's more or less in the same position as Thurman. I think at this moment, Thurman might have a little bit more leverage in terms of fighting for a title. But if Barrios wins, then he claims a lot of leverage.
Yeah, I agree with you. And also, Thurman's, 33 years old. Barrios is about 26, 27 or so. So I think it's more likely that Thurman jumps into a title shot if he wins, and wins impressively. Then I could see, an Errol Spence for him. Now, for Barrios, I think he also puts himself in play for a world title shot at 147, but a lot more welters too that'll be available to him. We'll touch on this fight a little more when we talk to Barrios, but for now, let's move on to the week in review. Last Saturday, we witnessed the first card of the new year. Fox Sports pay-per-view presented Luis Ortiz versus Charles Martin in the main event of a card featuring 5 heavyweight bouts. And man, we had some pretty good action. In the main event itself, Ortiz was down once in the first, then again in the fourth, but roared back in the sixth to drop Martin and put him away in that same round. It was a highlight reel knockout, Mike. But what did you think of the entire fight?
It's a great fight. Anytime you have 3 knockdowns in a heavyweight fight, it's going to be, it's going to be fun to watch. Another thing that made it interesting for me is that it seemed to be going one direction, only to go the other way in the end, which is always interesting. And ended in a knockout, which always is what the fans want to see pretty much. So there's a lot of drama packed into 5+ rounds.
I think one thing that a lot of folks are talking about, hardcore fans anyway, are talking about is the performance of Luis Ortiz. Obviously, we saw the one-punch KO, but he was also down twice. In your opinion, do you think he's lost a step?
I think he probably has. I think the broadcast team was right about his legs. They didn't look as sturdy as you would want them to be at times. Maybe they planted that idea in my head, but that's what it looked like to me too. The knockdowns of Ortiz were legit, but I wonder whether a younger version with stronger legs would have gone down like he did, especially from the jab. That was a really hard jab, the second one that put him down, but it was still a jab. That said, it wasn't as if he was being outclassed by Martin. He was holding his own at least. And in the end, he was able to set up a big shot and deliver it. Plus, I love the way he finished the job. I think overall it was a good performance, from him. But I think the clock is ticking. I think if he's going to get his opportunity, it probably should come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think all the points you just made are valid. I mean, the guy's 42. Has he lost a step? Probably. But the hand skills were definitely there. And obviously the power was certainly there, and that makes him a player. What about Charles Martin? Where does he go from here?
That's a good question. He looked pretty good until the ending. I thought he had a good chance to win until then, which would have put him, right back into the title mix. Now I don't know. I guess he has to get back in line, beat a recognizable opponent or two, and then hope he gets, back to where he was. I just getting back to the back of the line. I think that's what he's facing right now. I'm assuming that's where he's going to go. As he did look pretty good. He probably didn't leave the ring, too devastated. He lost the fight, but I think he knows he looked pretty good for most of the fight, so he'll probably be back.
Yeah, I think that's as good as I've seen him fight. Perhaps ever, even in that short period. If I were him, I try to jump right back into the ring, and build on this performance because there's nothing to be ashamed of here. Who would you like to see Ortiz face next?
Well, I'd like to see him get one more shot at a title after falling short twice against Deontay Wilder. I doubt that'll happen right away, though, so he has to stay busy. I'd like to see him fight one of the next level guys, someone like Andy Ruiz Jr., Frank Sanchez, Robert Helenius, Joseph Parker, who just had a good victory. A guy at that level. Then, if he can win one of those fights, I think he'll be in a really strong position to get a title shot, which is obviously what he wants before he's finished. I don't know whether he beats any of those guys, but maybe he does. He certainly has the power, even if he's slowed down a bit.
Yeah, I like all those fights, particularly the Ruiz fight. I like Wilder Ruiz too. So if Deontay gets Eddie Ruiz first, I won't complain. But I do like the Ruiz fight for him next. Apparently, Ortiz did suffer an injury during the fight, so he may be sidelined for a while. So we'll see what he does next. Now, in the co-feature, rising heavyweight contender Frank Sanchez remained undefeated, easily outpointing late substitute Christian Hammer over 10 rounds. Sanchez had boxing superstar Canelo Alvarez ringside cheering him on, and Canelo also told Ray Flores that he believes Sanchez will be a world champion in a year. What were your thoughts on Sanchez's performance?
I had mixed feelings about it, to be honest. And I wrote this, I thought of the late, great Emanuel Stewart yelling at Vladimir Klitschko to get Eddie Chambers out of there late in their fight. This is about a decade or more ago. Because the reason I bring that up, Stewart knew the value of a knockout. Sanchez gave a strong performance. He outboxed and outworked a solid guy to win by a shutout decision. It's hard to be too critical of that. I just think he'll collect more fans if he shifts into another gear and takes out opponents, particularly ones who aren't in his class. And really, Hammer's not in his class. As I wrote, fans admire guys who win decisions, but they fall in love with guys who score knockouts. So I really like Sanchez as a fighter. I think he does have a really bright future. He would just make more fans if he was whacking guys out of there.
Do you think, that's something that he should be trying to do? Getting rid of these guys instead of cruising to a unanimous decision and so forth? That's
a tough one, in spite of everything I just said. You're asking a guy who to fight out of character. Sanchez is a boxer. He's not a brawler. That's what he learned in the Cuban amateur system. His thing is to outbox his opponents. That's his comfort zone, and it's worked for him. So it's also like, why? It's worked so well for him. Why mess with that? On the other hand, it goes back to marketing. I think he'd be a bigger star if he took guys out. Maybe there's a happy medium. Maybe he can pick up the pace without putting himself in serious danger. He kind of did that in the last round. I'm sure that's something that Eddie Reynoso and him will talk about going forward. But I like what I see overall.
I think they will discuss that, and we'll see what comes of that. Who would you like to see Sanchez face next?
I honestly think he's ready for anyone, including the title holders. Again, like Ortiz, I don't think that's going to happen right away. So I'll throw out the names I threw out for Ortiz: Andy Ruiz, Robert Helenius. I'm mentioning Joseph Parker. He just won his last fight, and Ortiz himself.
Yeah, yeah.
That's another possibility. Guys like that. I think that's where Sanchez is now. He's really good, even if he's not Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I like that Ortiz fight. Come to think of it, I like him against any of the winners on this card. Really, maybe not the winner of the next fight we're about to discuss, the third bout on the pay-per-view card. Johnny Rice defeating Michael Coffey yet again. The first time was a TKO win in July of last year. This time he won a unanimous decision in a bout where I didn't think Coffey really threatened him.
No. I thought it was interesting to see. I found the fight interesting because I wanted to see if Coffey could do anything different to turn the tables from the last fight. He really didn't do that. I thought Rice was in control most of the way, which is why he won a clear decision. I kind of felt sorry for Coffey as I was watching, pretty much watching any hope he had of becoming a major player in the division sort of slip away. So it was kind of an interesting fight. It was kind of sad. Rice looked okay though.
What did you make of his performance?
It's difficult to gauge Rice's ability. He's good enough to beat a limited guy like Coffey, but he's also come up short against other second-tier guys, and he's lost to like next-level guys like Tony Yoka and F.A. Ajagba handled him pretty easily. That said, I think the guy has some ability. He moves really well for a guy his size. He can box a little, and that right hand, that appears to be the real deal. He looks like he has a good right hand. I want to see how he does against a better opponent, assuming he trains properly, by the way.
Yes.
He came in a little too heavy against Coffey, which is hard to figure out because that was a really big opportunity for him to win, to score another victory. So why he came in, what was it, like 15 pounds more than the first fight? I don't know. Maybe there's something that we don't know, but that was weird.
Yeah, that was disturbing, quite honestly, given what was at stake against Coffey in the rematch. You'd think, a new lease on his career was at stake. So to come in, 15 pounds every year. I mean, Coffey came in 6 pounds every year. I thought was
still won.
Was a bit worrisome. But he did. Yeah. He obviously didn't affect him too much. What does this mean for Michael Coffey?
Well, this is my take on this. I think a guy who started boxing at 30 has gone about as far as he can, which isn't even a criticism. He actually should be proud of what he's been able to accomplish. To become an important heavyweight, which is when you get on TV, you're an important heavyweight. From where he started was pretty impressive. I don't know whether he'll call it quits. I'm just not sure what the point is now, but remember, he's a former Marine. I don't think Marines give up so easily. I won't be shocked if he decides to continue, but I just don't know how much more he could accomplish.
Yeah, unfortunately, this is that part of boxing where the up and coming prospect steps up and you see what he has, and in this case, he was found wanting. What about Rice? Where does he go from here?
Like I said, I want to see Rice against a guy that's a little bit better than Coffey and see how he does, especially if he comes in shape. Again, I'm seeing it against Coffey, but I did see something that told me that this guy's got a little something.
Right.
Again, especially his athleticism. He almost 300 pounds or whatever he weighed. He was like 270 something pounds. He moved really well.
283 maybe. Yeah.
Whatever it was, he moved really well. So if he loses 20 pounds, he might actually have something going on.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, also on the card, the Turkish Olympian Ali Aaron Demirenzin scored a career best victory with an 8th round stoppage of former title challenger Gerald Washington. What were your thoughts on that fight?
Yes, in a way, that some of this card was just kind of sad for me. That fight was a little bit looked okay for a few rounds, but he just faded pretty quickly, and he just looked like he was out of it. And I don't think it was so much what his opponent was doing. It was just like, I don't know. It's like he's pushing 40 and that's it. He did the work in training camp. He always does. Maybe it was an age thing. He's 39 years old. Or maybe it was something we don't know about. That's always another possibility. Anyway, he didn't show us much. Demirenzin just gave him a beating, until the fight was stopped. Good for Demirenzin, really bad for Washington. So, it was kind of difficult to watch that.
Yeah, I mean, Demirenzin did put on the pressure, but it wasn't like he was doing much behind it. for Washington to be as fatigued as he was, as early in the fight as he was.
Right.
What does the future hold for Washington?
Listen, I once asked Washington whether he considered retirement after he got stopped in back-to-back fights against Deontay Wilder and Gerald Miller. He snapped at me, saying that he's not a quitter. I really admired that response. It was kind of shocking at the moment, but I kind of admired it after I thought about it for a second. That said, he's now lost 5 of his last 7 fights. He has the knockout of Hellenius in July 2019, which kind of pumped life into his career. But he was stopped by Charles Martin and then now Demerizan after that. If I were close to him, I'd say, listen, you're 39, you've had success, but the trajectory isn't good. Maybe you should think about walking away. And I think I would say that directly to him, even after what happened the last time, because that's how I feel. But I never want to tell a guy that he should quit doing something that he needs to do or that he loves, that he wants to do. It's him. It's on him. He's still not an old man. He just kind of looked like one in the fight.
Yeah, he did. And I think that he should just, watch the fight, go back, assess his performance, take a little break and see what he wants to do career-wise. What about Demerizan? Who should he face next?
Well, I think that victory earns him a shot at like another fringe contender, whoever that might be. This guy's a tough guy. He never stops coming at you, as you mentioned. He keeps the pressure on you. He's lost a couple of fights, I think. So it doesn't always work what he did, but he looked pretty formidable in that fight. I can see him giving more guys trouble. I don't know specifically, but I think a fringe contender.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe he should face a Victor Faust next. Faust was the unbeaten heavyweight prospect who was a TV opener on the pay-per-view. He took on veteran Iago Kalaji, and what an amazing fight this was. 3 knockdowns in the first, Kalaji down twice, Faust once. Then the second round kicks off, and Faust is dropped the second time, and then Kalaji a 4th time, and then the referee stops the fight, and then some weirdness ensues. I mean, this bout had a bit of everything. What was your take on what you saw?
Yeah, that's the kind of fight that you never completely forget. It went from a wildly entertaining brawl with 5 total knockdowns to a strange fight overall because of the ending and then what followed. I love the back and forth action. I didn't love what happened after that.
Well, what'd you make of this stoppage? A lot of people thought that it was premature.
Well, my gut reaction at the moment the ref stopped it was just kind of like, no, because I just didn't want the fight to end. It was just so much fun to watch. It really was. That was like, I can't remember how much a fight was much more fun to watch than that while it lasted. And I think actually one can argue that the stoppage was a little premature, in part because Kaladze was in no worse condition than Faust was. That said, the ref explained why he stopped it. It made sense. I hesitate to be too critical of him because, his job is to assess a fighter's condition at any given moment. He did that. I hated that Kaladze and there's a second part. I hated that Kaladze threw a little jab at the ref, even if I can understand his frustration. I don't have to say it, but I will. You just can't hit the ref. He's going to pay a stiff price for that. So the ending was unfortunate, but I think the stoppage was okay. Maybe arguably a little premature, but I think it was okay.
Yeah, I think you could make a case it was a little premature, but I got it. I did notice on the replays that when Kalaji got up, he was wobbly. I mean, the guy told him to come forward and he went sideways.
He did.
And that's what convinced him to stop the fight. And so, I get it. What's next for Faust, though?
I think he needs to go back into he's this big prospect. I think he needs to go back in the gym and figure out what went wrong. Because I don't think anybody expected that. I think that the situation he was in, I think people thought he would just breeze past Kaladze. Well, that didn't happen. So maybe work on his defense. Maybe worry a little bit more about what's coming back at you. So I think he's got some work to do. So I think in his case, you fight a guy maybe at Kaladze's level again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think he should jump up just yet. Just obviously needs a little bit more developing. The tools are there. And we'll see who they've got for him next. We also had a fun card on Fox leading up to the pay-per-view. Undefeated lightweight prospect Frank the Ghost Martin, who we had on the podcast last week, took a pretty big step up in class facing veteran Romero Duno, but he made it look like easy work. I mean, Martin scored a sensational 4th round TKO win. What did you think of his performance?
We exchanged some emails immediately after that fight. I was watching that fight thinking, whoa, this is really impressive.
Very.
I don't want to read too much into Martin's performance because, he's still a prospect, I guess, technically, although he's ranked number 13 by the WBA. And Duno is a solid guy, but he's not great. But I'll say that Martin, to me, appears to have the goods. I mean, I love his skills, his speed, his athleticism. He's so poised in there. He's just so
Yeah.
poised. He knew exactly what he was doing at every second. And he obviously has like power to end a fight at any moment. Where's the weakness? And he has a great trainer in his corner in Derek
Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
And this guy's just got a huge upside. I can't wait to see what's next for him.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. How far away is Martin from challenging the division's elite?
This is one of those situations where I think this guy is good enough to compete with anyone, but he has to prove that on a higher level. He has to
Yeah.
beat a next level guy or two before we know for sure. Uh, Again, that said, it's pretty clear to me that he's very, very close to being at that elite level. I mean, I really, really liked what he saw. I just need to see it one or two more times.
Yeah, exactly. I think that no need to rush. Obviously, the tools are all there. It looks like the intangibles are there, but just have him go through the paces and see what happens. Who would you like to see him face next?
I don't know specifically, but he needs to face a top 15 guy at that level.
Yeah, yeah.
He's not a kid. Remember, he's 26 years old. I think he's ready to make a serious move. I think he's prepared in every respect to do that. So yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I still think he's, maybe one more fight before he challenges the top
maybe a
15 or so.
couple. Well,
Yeah,
the top
maybe a
15.
couple.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
that talent though. I mean, he might be able to beat anybody right
he
now, but
might.
we just don't know.
Right. I mean, I think that he's at least you take one more fight and then you put him in with maybe a Javier Fortuna or even a Rolando
Wow.
Romero. You
Yeah,
know.
those are tough fights. Yeah.
Well, they're all
Yeah.
tough in that division.
Yeah.
That's the part of the
Yeah.
problem is that
Yeah.
there are no easy outs, But give him a couple fights before you put him in against that level. One other note on that card: much respect to both Giovanni Bruzon and Lenier Perro, two young heavyweight prospects who showed a lot of skill and will. Perro won an 8-round unanimous decision, but I suspect we'll be hearing both of these names again in the future. Standings for the new year are tied. Mike and I are both 1-0. That will not change this week. And it is time to bring in our first guest. He is a former 140-pound champ, and on Saturday, February 5th, he moves up to welterweight to take on former unified champion Keith Thurman in what promises to be an explosive bout on Fox Sports pay-per-view live from the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. Mario Barrios. Mario, first of all, Happy New Year to you and yours and to your entire family. And of course, we want to know how camp has been going so far.
Yeah, likewise, guys, Happy New Year, to you and your family. But I mean, camp has been great. I've been out here, since I want to say late October. We weren't quite sure when exactly our fight date was gonna land and who it was gonna be against. But I was ready regardless. And then around December time is when we got word, of this fight potentially happening. And I told my manager Louis, like right as soon as he brought it up to me, like man, like let's get it. Like that's a fight I would love. I know Keith is coming off a good layoff, and he's coming with a point to prove. So I mean I'm not looking at Keith as if it's an easy fight, or if he's been slacking or none of that. I'm picturing, Keith being in there, hungry, strong, in the best shape of his life, So I'm expecting a great fight come February 5th.
Yes, so are we. Now, I read that you stayed in the gym after the fight with Tank. Did you take a little break for yourself at some point?
Yeah. After the Tank fight, I took about a couple weeks off, once in like 3 weeks, and then I was right back in the gym. I'm always, staying pretty busy. There's never too long of a time that I'm away from the boxing gym.
You've had a lot of time to digest the Davis fight. You gave a good account of yourself, but fell short in the end. What do you think of when you think back on that fight?
I think I was I feel like I was boxing, beautifully. It was a very, competitive fight. I feel like, we both had brought, the best out of each other. And then yeah, I mean, towards the end of the fight, he come in with some good shots. And then even when the fight was called off, I felt like it was, that I could have definitely still continued, but that's me, just being the fighter that I am. And I mean, I understand, the ref is in there, to make decisions, based, for the fighter's well-being. And the ref, he made a call that he felt was necessary. And I mean, there's nothing I could do or say about that. But I mean, I was very happy, with the outcome of that fight, regardless. Even though we came away, with the loss. I had a lot of people checking up on me after the fight, which is greatly appreciated. Everyone was telling me, like, oh, keep your head up, stuff like that. And I was like, nah, like, you guys have no idea, like, this stuff. I mean, that fight, it motivated me so much more, than putting me down.
That's good to hear. You've mentioned that the move to 147 might have been a little bit overdue. How difficult was it for you to make 140?
It was getting pretty difficult, That's why, I mean, it was already a decision that we knew was going to be made pretty soon, even, before, we had agreed to the Tank fight. But, even in that fight, I made a weight. I did everything, the best way possible. I feel like, I was still strong in that fight and everything. There's no excuses. And but yeah, no, I mean, the move to welterweight, it was a long time coming. And and now that we are making this move, everything is just everything has just been going so smooth, with the weight and everything. Like it's just a lot more natural for me, and a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I can see that. Mario, you don't even look like you're five. You look like you're 6 foot tall, really, in person. So I'm not surprised that the weight feel. How different is it though, training as a welterweight? Do you feel? You said it feels natural. Is there more strength or speed, or what is it?
Yeah. Just I mean, really, I mean everything. Just the whole. The stamina, the power, the speed, everything. I feel great right now. I've been sparring, super welterweights, the natural, 154s, and I've been feeling great in there. And so I'm really looking forward, to showcasing, my talents, my abilities at the welterweight division, especially it's such a huge fight in Vegas.
Yeah, it sounds like you're expecting to be. I mean, I hate using this, but almost like a new improved Mario Barrios on February 5th.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the whole name of this game. Even coming off the Tank loss, there was still a lot that we were able to take away from that fight and get right back into the gym, and work on. And that's something, especially with Virgil. Every camp, we're always trying to improve something, and we're always trying to just every day we're in the gym, we're trying to work on something, to be a more complete and improved fighter.
Mario, nobody would have blamed you had you decided to face a second-tier opponent as a transition to a new weight. Why did you jump right into a fight against an elite 147-pounder?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a decision, that again, when I was talking to Luis Acubas, my manager, about, just the whole move up to welterweight. He was more or less picking my brain and asking, like who would I want to be in there, who would I kind of want to, be against. And I told him, like, man, like I don't want an easy fight. Like if possible, like, man, like I want to fight like one of the best, welterweights. I mean, I want those big fights, while I'm at an age, where I am not past my prime. I'm at, I'm 26 right now. This is, I'm at the age where I want to take these big fights. I want to take the risky fights, that a lot of people aren't willing to step up to. For me, again, just to test my abilities in this sport. And I mean, I know for a fact it's a fight that, boxing fans and just sport fans in general, are going to be able to enjoy.
Love that. I don't know if you've even thought much about this, but you're now in one of the sport's glamour divisions with a number of big name stars. Is that added motivation for you, or have you just not thought much about that?
No, it's dead motivation. I mean, the welterweight division, it's a stacked division. There's talent from all over. Again, this is why I was like, man, if I'm moving up to welterweight, I want to make my mark right away. I want to solidify my place, as quickly as possible. And what better way, than fighting Keith Thurman? I mean, I know it's a dangerous fight. I know it's a fight not a lot of people, are willing to take, even if they, have been at welterweight, for a while. But again, I mean, that's, the type of fighter I am. I want these type of challenges.
You said it's a dangerous fight. What are your thoughts on Keith Thurman as a boxer?
I believe he's a great boxer. I mean, there's a reason why he only has his defeat against Pacquiao, and I believe he has good movement. He's of course he was a knockout artist for a while, and so he has the power. I believe his style, my style is just they match up well, to be a very exciting fight. But yeah, no, I mean I believe Keith is a great fighter, and I believe him coming off his layoff, he's probably more hungry than ever, so that's what makes this fight that much more exciting, for me.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it. I mean, he hasn't fought in a while, and hasn't been at his best, for even longer than that. Although he does seem healthy now. What do you expect from him?
Even given him coming off the his layoff and everything, I'm still expecting the best Keith Thurman come February 5th. Every day we're in the gym, we're picturing, we're trying to imagine like what Keith Thurman is going to be in the ring come February 5th. And every time I'm in the gym, I'm expecting Keith to be working his ass off. I know he's not going to go in there February 5th, not ready, especially, because he wants to prove a point. He wants to get back on track to where he was in the division. But again, this is my first fight at welterweight, and I'm trying to make my own impact, my own stamp in the division.
Now, there seems to be some chatter from him as well, really, about Keith fighting Spence and other fighters. Do you get the sense that maybe he's overlooking you a bit?
He might be, and if he is, that's the mistake that he's making. I can't speak on what he's thinking about, or what he's worried about right now. I just know I'm worried about Keith Thurman. And if he's worried about anybody else other than Mario Barrios, he's making a big mistake.
This is going to be your second consecutive fight in the main event of a pay-per-view card, which is sort of rarefied air. You must feel pretty good about that, no?
Yeah, no, I'm very grateful, for the opportunity again, to headline pay-per-view, this time on Fox. Again, even coming off of a loss, I know a lot of fighters don't get the opportunity again, and which is another form of motivation for me, because I know, man, a lot of fighters, they don't come off a loss and get this type of opportunity again. So I'm in the gym, I'm working, I'm hungry, and that's exactly why I'm so excited for February 5th. Just go out there and showcase my talents and abilities once more. And hopefully, we walk away with the win, whether it comes by stoppage or whether it goes the distance.
Does it feel different to fight on that big of a stage? Is it compared to like other fights in your career? Is that something you have to get used to?
I believe it is. Just not necessarily because of the fight, but just everything that comes with the fight. All the interviews, all the press, the whole fight week, just everything that you have to do, to be, the main event, to be like headlining these, major cards. But I mean, I'm thankful, again, I have a great team behind me. I have, great friends, great people surrounding me, and so whether I'm at the top right now, or at the bottom, I know I have great people around me and that always definitely helps out because I mean it's easy to, well, I'm not able to see how there are fighters that get caught up in in everything else that comes with being a headlining fight or a main event fight.
February 5th, I mean, pay-per-view, Las Vegas, Keith Thurman. This is such a huge fight. What does a victory do for your career?
I think a victory February 5th, it does. It takes my career to that next level again. To that next chapter. In Mario Barrios's legacy. In the sport. And like I said, I want to make my stamp in the division, and which is why we have taken such a difficult fight, such a difficult task, and I believe a victory over Keith Thurman, someone who has been there with some of the best in the division. That'll I feel like it puts me up there with with the at least the top 10 great 147s right now.
Yeah, for sure. More than that, I think. Now, I have a funny feeling how you're going to answer this, but our last question for you, Mario, what's your prediction for Saturday, February 5th? What goes down?
I never give away too much with the predictions, but like I said, I mean, I've had a great camp. I'm feeling, stronger than ever, especially coming off, my last fight. We're taking things to a different level. And I'm just excited, to be back, in front of the boxing fans, at the Mandalay Bay, where, a lot of great fights have been. And, just, showcasing, to everybody, the fighter that I am. And, to be across, from a fighter like Keith Thurman. I mean, it's going to be fireworks. It's going to be a very exciting fight.
Yeah, for sure. We can't wait for it. I know the fans can't wait for it. Mario, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to us. All the best to you on February 5th. Train hard and do your thing that night, man. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, no problem, guys. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate y'all.
It's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe. Our first topic of the new year is 5 breakout candidates for 2022. Of course, we'll go in ascending order. Mike, the floor is yours.
Okay, short preface to our conversation. This was one of those that was kind of hard to do because there was, I thought of like 10 to 15 guys who could fall into this category. So my top 5 is basically 5 guys, just 5 guys, not necessarily the 5 guys, 5 guys who I think could make that move that we're talking about. And these are 5 really good young fighters. So my number 5, I'm starting with Gary Antoine Russell. I just really like his combination of skill set, the power, and what I call his responsible aggression. He can box, but he's not a technician by a long shot. He's an aggressive guy by nature. He attacks his opponents. He isn't reckless about it, though. He uses his ring acumen to set up his shots. And when they land, they do a lot of damage, as 14 knockouts and 14 fights indicates. I really think this guy could be a force in the coming year.
Yeah, I'm totally with you with respect to Gary Antoine Russell. So I'll get back to him in a little bit. My number 5 is undefeated super welterweight Joey Spencer. Now, we saw what Spencer did in his last fight against Limburg Ponce on Christmas Day, and he looked excellent knocking Ponce out. I just think this guy has developed well quietly under the radar and is ready to make his move. I expect to see him against some legitimate contenders in 2022.
Yeah, I thought about Spencer. He's one of the guys I thought about, and we talked about this earlier. I really liked the way he looked the other day. He looked really, really good in that fight. I think maybe I hesitated a little bit because it seems to me like he might still be a year away, but I could be wrong. He looked really good in that last fight, as I said.
Yeah, indeed he did. Very, very impressive. Also, shout out to Michelle Rivera, who did not make my list. As quite a few people didn't make my list that probably could have, just like you, Mike. But and likely are just as deserving. Now, my number 4 is Gary Antoine Russell. Same reasons that you mentioned. I mean, tremendous talent, amateur background, skill set, you name it, pedigree. This guy has it all. I can't wait to see what he does in the 140-pound division, ultimately at 147, maybe even 135, because he weighed 137 for his last fight. But I'd like to see him be more active in 2022 and make a name for himself, because he truly is one of those under-the-radar prospects who may be the best of them all.
Yeah, well, I've already given the word on him. Yeah, I really like what I see, and he's fun to watch on top of everything else, which
absolutely.
again, you know is important to me. So my number 4 is Chris Colbert. I know he has an interim title right now,
or had. I don't know if he still
or
does.
had, whatever it is. So I still consider him a guy who hasn't quite had that final breakout. So he's number 4. I think Colbert is off the charts in terms of God-given gifts. He's also well-schooled, which is a dangerous combination for anybody he fights. He's already beaten some solid guys, including Tug Bouhairie in his most recent fight. I think he gives the next level opponents all kinds of hell. I hope he gets the opportunity this year, because he's got it all. I think maybe I don't know if it's a weakness. He's not a huge puncher, but in his case, I don't think it's going to matter that much.
Yeah, I think he's got it all too. He's not on my list simply because he won some form of a belt, and I try to stray from those guys, but he could certainly have a breakout 2022. I mean, it's all there for him. I expect him to be in a big fight at some point this year, maybe a couple, if he's victorious in one. Let's move on to number 3. Who's your guy?
So we've talked a lot about him here, Frank Sanchez.
Ooh, I like it.
I think this one is pretty obvious, actually. He has the boxing ability to give anybody trouble, including the top heavyweights. I think he's close to fighting a next level guy. And when he does, I don't see why he can't keep doing what he's been doing. He's that good. And when he gets, a Fury or Wilder or an Usyk or a Joshua in the ring, I think he would have a genuine chance of winning that fight. Now, a friend of mine who's also a big fan, pretty knowledgeable guy, said maybe Sanchez is a small heavyweight, which could work against him. I've thought of that too, but I think he's big enough, and I think combined with his ability and his experience, I think he'll be fine. I think he's going to win a title at some point. Might happen this year.
Yeah, I definitely think that he'll be fine in terms of facing opponents and size and so forth. I don't know if he'll get a heavyweight title shot this year. I couldn't see it. That's why he didn't make my list. However, he could face someone like a Luis Ortiz this year, a couple guys like Luis Ortiz
this year. That's almost like a breakout anyway.
Right. If he's victorious, and there you go, then he's most certainly fulfilled the requirement. So I think it's a pretty good choice. My number 3 is 140-pound contender Subriel Matias. We saw what this guy did last year, and I just think that point blank period that he is a dangerous, when focused, special talent, and one of the more exciting guys that I have seen in the ring in quite some time. He's almost like a 140-pound Jarrett Hurd in the way that he fights, and obviously we'll see him very, very soon, January 22nd. He's got the rematch against Petro. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name, but the guy who beat him. He's
Ananyan. Yeah, Petros Ananyan.
Okay, there you go. He's got that rematch, and that's going to be a huge tell. But if he's able to emerge from that and look good, I think we'll see him against one of the best at super lightweight this year.
Yeah, you know what? You reminded me how much I loved his last couple fights. Yeah, I really love his style. Super, super fun to watch. This guy's just an absolute beast. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens when he fights that next level guy.
Yeah, my number 2 is Mr. Carlos Adames. Adames, of course, moved up from 154 to 160, and we saw what he did against Sergey Derevyanchenko, a career best win for Mr. Adames, who's had a bit of a resurgence, I guess, in his last 2 bouts. You could say after being, I don't want to say that he was left for dead. That would be a little unfair. But quite frankly, a lot of people wrote Carlos Adames off a couple years back when he lost to Patrick Teixeira, and now we see where he's at. And he's on the verge of a world title shot at 160 pounds.
Yeah, if he was written off, I think he basically reversed that against Derevyanchenko. I was really surprised. I thought Derevyanchenko was going to win that fight, but Adames not only did he win, but it was a clear win. I think I scored it 97-93 for him. So yeah, good all around fighter. I'm with you. I expect big things from him.
Who's your number 2?
My number 2 is a guy we've been talking about a long time, Virgil Ortiz Jr. Ortiz is only 23 years old, but it seems like we've been talking about him forever. He's 18-0 with 18 knockouts, and he's not Edgar Berlanga. He's already stopped a number of good opponents. I have no idea how he might do it.
At the Berlanga line. We'll go on.
I mean, listen, I don't mean to be so cruel, but I mean, Berlanga now doesn't look like he did before.
Right.
And who knows? Maybe that'll motivate the guy to do something. But anyway, I think Ortiz is a level above that. I have no idea how he might do against the top welterweights, but I think it's time that we find out. I'll say this: I won't be surprised if he knocks off a big name, whoever that might be, if he gets a fight. I think he's got the talent, he's got the power, so let's see what happens with him.
Yeah, and he could be in line for a shot against Terrence Crawford. That's a fight I would certainly pay to watch. Yeah. Great fight there. Let's go on to number 1. I suspect we have the same number 1. Is he from Philly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it you go by the name Boots?
That's it. That's the guy.
Yeah, same guy over here, Jaron Boots, and it's clearly my number 1. And I'm pretty sure our reasons are the same. The guy is just flat out phenomenal. And, we had Steven Espinoza on a week ago, and he believes that Ennis could get a world title shot this year, at the very least a title eliminator. And this could be the year we see him in against some names in the welterweight division.
Yeah, I feel like I'm becoming a cheerleader for Ennis, which I kind of am, but I'm okay with that. I really believe that this guy's, it's hard to predict this kind of thing, but I really believe he's a future pound for pound number 1. Once again, he reminds me of Roy Jones Jr., which for me is the ultimate compliment. He fights with his hands down at his waist. He's cocky, but it works for him. He's super skilled, super quick, and that power is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. He has no business. He has no right to have this combination of skill and power. Can he beat Errol Spence or Terrence Crawford right now? Honestly, I have no idea. But I do believe he's as talented as they are, just God-given talent. Now he just needs a chance to prove it. So in this case, I really cannot wait to see him against the kind of guy I'm just talking about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait too. I mean, I think that, not to mention his dedication, his conditioning, all of those things are extremely impressive as far as I'm concerned. And that is going to do it for Toe to Toe. We're going to move on to our next guest. He is the Vice President of Communications for Heyman Boxing, also Premier Boxing Champions, a longtime boxing journalist himself, Mr. Tim Smith. Tim, first things first, how were your holidays?
No, we don't really understand that word at the Premier Boxing Champions. So Kenneth can attest to that. They were chock full of activity, as it were. But no, they were good. We had shows on Christmas, we had shows on New Year's, and we were preparing for those. The week leading up. So we didn't really slow down, but got a chance to, because I was at home, got a chance to spend time with my family, so it was all good. It's all good.
And watch the fights at home. You brought up the Christmas show and the New Year's show. What were your thoughts on those shows, and can we expect more boxing events on those holidays?
I think so, because I think we've hit upon something, and when I say we, it's a euphemistic we, because I didn't have anything to do with planning that, but I think we've hit upon something where at night people are at home, having spent, all of that time all day with Uncle Ned and Aunt Jenny, they just want to steal away and go watch, people hit each other upside the head. So I think we've hit upon something with doing that. I'm waiting to see what the Fox numbers were for this last pay-per-view that we did. And the Christmas Day show was not a pay-per-view, and that number was tremendous. Yes, it had a great lead in, but that show did almost 3 million views, and it held on pretty good to the lead in for that. So, but I think we've hit upon something, and you just got to find the right show, and I think it's got to be like action. It's got to be action packed to get people's attention and everything. So. But I think we've hit upon something, and I would dare say it'll be something that we probably see in the future.
Tim, a lot of businesses struggled or even closed during the pandemic for obvious reasons. How would you say boxing has done as a business through the pandemic?
I think boxing remained robust and healthy during the pandemic. I think, I think the people that are in the business of boxing are ultimately they're survivors. They figure it out. They know how to make it work. They know how to organize it so that they can carry on. It's sort of the old, the show must go on mentality. And I think as a business, I think boxing sort of did very well. Now, it was aided by the fact that, those entities that had network deals probably fared a little bit better than people that were streaming, total streaming, because, you had, as a backstop, you had the network that was, that was supporting you. So I think boxing figured it out. Even when we were not allowed to have crowds, we figured it out. And then once the crowds came back, I think that, that door was open, and I don't see that door closing back. I don't see anybody going back to, no crowds, no audiences. I just don't see that happening. So, I think the business for the most part, did really well. Now, would it have done, a lot better if early on you could have had crowds? Absolutely. And I think a lot of fights that people want to see, a lot of the stars in the sport that people wanted to see, they would have seen them if there would have been an opportunity for a gate in some of those shows so you could spread around the cost of, what these guys are making.
Yeah, those were just weird times. Seeing those fights with no crowd is something I'll never forget.
Yes,
You didn't like the pumped-in crowd noise?
Honestly, the whole thing was kind of interesting, especially when you could hear so much what was going on in the ring. But obviously, it's a million times better when you have the fans there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
It seems kind of quiet in boxing right now. When can we expect to hear some announcements from the PBC?
I think you're gonna get hit with a flood of stuff, pretty soon. I can't tell you exactly when that's going to happen, but as Kenneth can attest, the floodgates open, sometimes a week before we think it's going to open up. We'll go through lulls where there's absolutely, we think we can take a breather, and as soon as you get ready to inhale, you get hit with a flurry of things where, Showtime is getting ready to announce their schedule. Some fights are being made on Fox, some big pay-per-views are being signed and that kind of thing. So I don't think we're going to get out of January without something coming down. And I think part of that, and I'll say January, late January, early February, and I think part of that is because, from the Fox perspective, they want to take advantage of having the NFL to really pump something. So, that's been a really nice asset for us, is to have that network and have, millions of people watching that, and then, pumping out a show. So, yeah. But I would say probably by the end of January, maybe earlier than that.
Now, you wrote for the New York Times, for the Daily News. You covered boxing for a long time. What's your take on the boxing media space these days?
I don't want to sound like an old man who's just taking shots at young guys that are out there. I'll leave that to Michael Rosenthal. You can shake your fist in the air.
That's what I'm doing right now.
I know you're shaking your fist.
Yeah.
I think we've lost the art of storytelling in the sport. And when you think about all the great boxing writers that were there before, that was really what the sport was built on, was just the characters and the stories, and, the harder they fall on the waterfront, just all of those fantastic stories that became movies. And, and you would have guys that would cover the sport like, people cover basketball or the NFL now. They would go up to camp and just hang out with guys. And I'm not advocating that guys do that. But what I am advocating is that guys educate themselves a little bit better on the sport by going to a gym. Why don't we have guys go to a gym every now and then? And I'm sure Michael can attest to this. Sometimes you go to a gym and you stumble upon a story that is just unbelievable, And it's not even the story that you went there for. And I'll give you a case in point. I went to do a story when I was in LA. I went to the LA boxing gym, and I went to do a story on Reggie Johnson, who was fighting Roy Jones. And I see this beautiful woman over in the corner, like hitting a speed bag. And I'm like, who is that? And somebody said, that's Ali's daughter. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. They was like, no, we're not kidding you. And so, you know, I raced over to her and asked her if she had spoken to any reporters. And she said no, she hadn't. I got a vow from her. And she had been coming to the gym for like 3 months. But it goes to show that nobody, you know, no reporters or no real reporters had actually gone to the gym. And so I told her, I said, well, you know, if you get approached by a reporter, I was working at the New York Times. I said, you know, don't do an interview, but call me if anybody approaches you. And I said, you know, I'll come back next week and, you know, I want to sit down with you and do this story. And so I did the story, and that turned out to be a 1A story in the New York Times. 1A, the cover of the New York Times. But I think, you know, the value of going to the gym, you know, where you make the relationships with fighters. And I had one boxing writer who was fairly prominent, who's not so prominent anymore, but I had him early on in his career ask me why the fighters like me so much. And I said, because I go to the gyms and I go to where they work. I go to where they're comfortable. I don't ask them to come to my house. I go to where they live, and I sit down and I talk to them, you know, and, you know, so I would get greeted warmly because guess what? When a guy was, you know, a 5-0 prospect, you know, I might have gone to a gym to talk to a champion, but guess what? I took the time to talk to this kid that was coming up. And, you know, you could talk to Peter Quillen. And, you know, I went to the Church Street gym and I talked to Peter Quillen. And, you know, we became like really good friends because, you know, I went to where he lived. I went to where he worked. And he even named one of his tarantulas after me. So
it's awesome.
Little creepy, but you know, I love Pete, man. You know, but you develop like, you know, you develop relationships with guys that last, you know, even longer than they're in the sport itself. So yeah. I think one thing that's missing is that guys are not developing those kinds of relationships with the boxers, and they're not telling those stories. And you know, what they consider like breaking news is business, you know, and I never thought that business was that interesting. And I always thought that guys that wrote about the business side of boxing just don't understand the sport, and they cover it that way to cover up for the fact that they don't know anything about the sport. And that's just basically, you know, my view on that. And I'm not taking anybody to task. I think, you know, guys are capable of doing a better job, but, you know, the template is there because it's led to people getting prominent, you know, jobs at, you know, at major sites, major entities, because the people that hire them don't know anything about the sport and don't understand the sport. So they let them do whatever it is that they want to do. And that's the way that they choose to cover the sport. They choose to cover the sport as a business when basically it's about the people that climb into the ring and, you know, put their lives on the line. That's the sport.
You're preaching to the choir. I agree.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
I felt that way for a long time. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
No, okay. I mean, we talk a lot about journalistic objectivity, and you know, you have a group of boxing fans who believe PBC doesn't get a fair shake from the boxing media, and another group who disagrees. Where do you stand on this issue?
I think polarization is part of our society now. I think if people can't be polarized and come down on the side of something, they're not happy. And I think we live in a society where there are a lot of unhappy people, a lot of people that are miserable in their own lives. And, you know, Twitter has become basically the cesspool of civilization. And I'm not going to go as far to say that it's going to end civilization, because I think that there are a lot of intelligent, wise people that are no part of that, you know, that are really in charge of doing things and making things, you know, work. But, you know, the polarization on there is it's just phenomenal. You know, I don't spend, and, you know, Kenneth can attest to this. I don't spend my day looking at what people are saying on Twitter. Most of the time, if I read Twitter, it's like at 11 o'clock at night, and the argument is 6 or 7 hours old, and Kenneth has already, either liked it or didn't like it and retweeted it or whatever. And I'm like an old man. I'm sending it to him like it's fresh. And he's like, yeah, what's this old dude doing? So Kenneth tolerates me in the way that I do Twitter, but it's really a wasteland. And if you're going to be productive in the sport, it's not the place to be. So from a standpoint of trying to get things done in the sport and trying to protect boxers in the sport, it's not a place where you want to inhabit or spend a large amount of time. The people that are on there that pretend like they're in the know, they haven't seen a single contract of a fighter. They haven't seen a single network contract. They haven't seen any reports from reliable pay-per-view outlets. They claim that they have the best sources and everything. Well, guess what? If you had the best sources and you were this tied in, you would be working for one of those networks. You would be doing analytics for, one of these companies. You wouldn't be on Twitter, bashing something, and it's just, and it really is, people trying to boost up their own ego and get their egos stroked by people that don't know what's going on. And these people call themselves fans, and they're not really fans. They're just, a lot of them aren't fans. They're just people that want to be in opposition to something. I'm not being an elitist. I'm not bashing anybody that's on Twitter. God bless you if you got the time to do that. But I don't have the time, the inclination, or the desire to be on there saying anything to anybody because, outside of the PBC, I have no idea what other companies are doing, nor do I care because I don't work for them, So I'm trying to make our company as strong as it possibly can be, and I'm trying to help the fighters that fight for us. That's all I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to help my friend Kenneth and my friend Michael Rosenthal. And other than that, I don't really care about anybody else.
And we appreciate that. On a happier note, as a veteran boxing writer, do you have any boxing books or specific book that you'd recommend to maybe younger fans to read?
Yeah. You know what? When I knew this question was coming up, I went and I dug out the things that I had read that were instrumental for me. But there's a book called On Boxing by Bert Sugar. And, Bert used to be like my go-to guy for all history. And
me too.
Yeah. So it's called, On Boxing by Bert Randolph Sugar. And of course, it's got 2 pictures of Bert on the cover. And then there's that. Yeah. Bert was actually sick when he recommended that I do the book with Lou Duva. Lou had asked him to do it, and Bert was sick, and he wasn't going to be able to fulfill his duties for that. And Bert turned that book over to me, and I finally got it completed with a few things that few tough things. So you have to call me personally for me to tell you what those are. But I like that book, Rope Burns by FX Tool. I thought it was really an interesting book, and I thought that was pretty good. And View from the Corner, A Life in Boxing, the Angelo Dundee book that had a foreword for Muhammad Ali, and it was actually autographed by Angelo Dundee and Bert Sugar. And then I know this book was controversial. People thought that there were a lot of mistakes in it, so it's got a couple of. You have to go and find like the book that was revised. It's called The 12 Greatest Rounds of Boxing: The Untold Stories by Ferdy Pacheco, the fight doctor. And Mills Lane did a fantastic foreword on this book. But it, I know people thought it had a couple of, problems with history. Hey, look, Ferdy was like a guy who was like, didn't let really facts get in the way of telling a good story. So you got to be a little careful. But I think there have been enough there have been enough iterations of that. And then my mentor at the New York Times, Dave Anderson, did a book on great boxing trainers talk about their art, and it's called In the Corner. And he talked to like some of the greats, that were boxing, boxing trainers, legendary boxing trainers. So that was it was, to me, it was a great book. Goody Petronelli, Angelo Dundee, Georgie Benton, Ray Arcel, Bill Slayton, Lou Duva, Emmanuel Stewart, Gil Clancy, Eddie Futch, Richie Giacchetti.
Sheesh.
It's got like stories from all of these guys, but those are my books. I just, but basically, I like all these books, and I didn't really mention the Ray Leonard book, but I like all these books because everybody signed them for me.
All you have to do is sign Tim's book and he'll be happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to recommend people read it. So, but no, they were excellent books, and the subject matter was good, and it gave insight into the sport. And those are the books that I would recommend.
I can't resist. I'm going to throw one out and then move on. King of the World.
Okay.
Early years of Muhammad Ali's career by David Remnick. Fantastic book.
Well, anything that David Remnick did was fantastic.
Exactly.
And and he did a great Ali book that was subsequent to that. That was just fantastic. But he never signed it for me, so I didn't mention him. Forget about him.
I shouldn't even.
He didn't sign the book. He didn't sign. You should have brought it up. He didn't sign it for me, so forget him.
Right, exactly.
No, I'm just kidding. No, Remnick's a great writer, but
he is. Yeah. So moving back to
the other book was the book by Mark Cram on the fight. Like the When They Were Kings kind of fight book.
Mm-hmm.
On the Ali. Yeah, that book was fantastic. But there are tons and tons of books that.
Yeah, we can go on and on.
If you're a true boxing fan, or if you just want to know anything about the sport, those are books that I would recommend that you add to your reading list. Do people read anymore? I'm just asking. I'm not trying to be funny, but do people read?
I have a Kindle. I read on my Kindle.
Okay. All right.
There you go.
Okay.
One person does. So moving back to the PBC, are there any plans to bring the PBC boxing back to New York?
Yeah, I think that is something that, is going to be explored. You got to find the right fight to bring here. And it's got to be somebody that's done well at Barclays Center, and you guys can figure out who those names are. The Danny Garcias of the world, the Deontay Wilders, the Charlos, although the Charlos have made Texas their stomping ground. So that could be a big ask to try to get them to come to New York. But yeah, I think there are, if there is something that makes sense, and makes dollars, you bring it here. New York's an expensive state, which I don't think people really realize that, nobody's repealed the tax on boxing, which is like 25%. It's a very expensive, and if you go back a few years, it was the UFC that put in a law basically that got passed that made it really cost prohibitive for people to do shows and boxing shows in New York, and it really favored the UFC, and that is really sort of curtailed boxing here in New York. But I think if the right show is available, it will turn up here. But you got to have the right show.
Interesting. Okay. One item from last year we've seen some conflicting opinions on are the amount of pay-per-views PBC has had over the past year. How do you reconcile this with the free TV model that most folks tied PBC to?
Well, there's still free TV for boxing. It might not be what people conceptually thought, was going to be free TV, but guess what? You can't have, Danny Garcia and Keith Thurman and Sean Porter and Errol Spence and Deontay Wilder, routinely fighting on free television because of the demands of their salary demands. Just, from a financial standpoint, it doesn't make sense. All of those guys have fought on free TV, but guess what? When they fought on free TV, all people did was rip the fights. Right. Oh, this fight sucks. This is horrible.
Can't win, right?
Why is he fighting this guy? Why is he fighting that guy? He's fighting Leonard Bundu. That's the guy that Keith Thurman beat. And why is Keith Thurman fighting Louis Collazo? And, why is Deontay Wilder fighting, Gerald Washington? Why is he fighting Eric Molina? Why is he fighting this guy? Oh, this is terrible. Guess what? Now, you can't bring those guys and put them back. You can't put that genie back in the bottle. But guess what? You're building guys that are going to be the future stars, the Jesus Ramoses. And Kenneth and I went through one exercise where we looked at a pay-per-view, and I can't remember the show, Kenneth. You might have to help me out. But that show was like stacked with future stars.
Well, there are a few of them. Just a show with the prospects on the show were guys like Jermell Charlo, Errol Spence, Deontay Wilder, Danny Garcia.
What was the main event in that card?
Maybe Amir Khan or Devin Alexander.
Yeah, it was like Amir Khan and Devin Alexander. I mean, it was something that was like, okay, now people would look at it and go, that's a horrible fight. But look at what you had on the undercard. Right. But I think people are so short-sighted that, you did appreciate seeing a Yordanis Ugas fight on free TV. You didn't enjoy watching a Jamal James come up on free TV. You didn't enjoy, and right now, you're not enjoying David Morrell coming up on free TV. You're not enjoying, Vito Malnicki come up on free TV. You're not enjoying Joey Spencer come up on free TV. But the shows are still free. But the salary demands that are out there for these guys are not supported on free television because guess what? There's no sponsorship. There's no advertising that would make that viable economically for it to be on free television. And when you go back to all these fights that were on free television, long time ago, those guys were not making, 10, 5, 6, 7, $8 million. Those guys weren't making that kind of money. The Larry Holmeses of the world, the Muhammad Ali's of the world, it was very special when they could make $5 million. I mean, Ali and Frazier, when they fought at the Garden, they each made $5 million. That's a $10 million show. And it was on closed circuit 40 years ago. The NFL was not getting billion-dollar rights fees to be on network television. They were begging to be on network television. So TV and money has changed drastically in 40 years. It's a little anti-boxer, if you ask me, because these guys deserve to make money, and they deserve to make the money that they can command and have the fight done. And who are we as fans and as consumers of boxing as an entertainment, who are we to go up to a guy and say, you're overpaid? Nobody comes to your job and tells you to your face or goes to your boss and say, hey, you're overpaying Michael Rosenthal. You shouldn't pay him that much money. He's not worth it. Well, guess what? His value is what your boss says your value is, or what they think you can command in the marketplace. And guess what? If they don't think you can command it in the marketplace, you don't get to fight on pay-per-view. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
You brought up a few names. It's a perfect segue to our next question. We saw a lot of names emerge, like a Stephen Fulton Jr. last year. What can you tell us about his rise, and who are some of the names you foresee coming up in the future?
Well, obviously, your boy Jaron Ennis is going to be a superstar.
Oh yeah.
You finally convinced me, Kenneth. The kid's special. He's gonna come up in the world. I think Jesus Ramos is gonna come up in the world. Stephen Fulton made a great rise. I never doubted that kid. I remember speaking to him like in some dark corner at the Microsoft Theater when he fought on the undercard of like a Leo Santa Cruz show. And I was really impressed with his work in that fight. And I went up to him and I said, man, I think you're going to be a star in this sport, man. And look, I wasn't blowing smoke because guess what? If I didn't think he was going to be a star, I didn't have to say anything to him, But his rise, I mean, the way that he handled himself, particularly in the Brandon Figueroa fight, that was a star-making performance. So, I think the world is his oyster at this point. But I expect other guys to be able to have those kinds of runs if they get put in the right, fights and they show up and show out. If I'm still allowed to use that in 2022, I have no idea whether I can use that or not. That might be too old. It might be dating myself.
Just did.
Yeah, well, that's okay. But yeah, I think guys like that, I just think that there are so many guys that we, have to look at, and Gary Russell is fighting, Mark Maxayo, and that guy looks like a welterweight. When we saw him, in the gym for the Gervonta Davis thing, I thought he was fighting Keith Thurman next or something. That kid's big, but there are a lot of guys out there that are hungry. I mean, and you look at, what George Kambosos did. And people are always, this is the thing that kills me with boxing things. They're always saying that these guys suck and they're no good and you can't measure a man's heart. I mean, you just can't. You're foolish to do that. You can't measure a man's heart and you can't measure a man's desire, and you really don't know what they're going to do. And there were so many upsets this past year in boxing, and people should be ashamed of themselves by going into fights. And everybody wants to be a pundit and say that they called it. The fight was going to be horrible. It was going to be this. It was going to be that. And, everybody, Luis Ortiz is too old. Charles Martin's going to handle him and this and that. And, come on. Just give it up. Just watch the fights and see what happens, And guess what? Free boxing, there's free boxing on TV. Just sit back, watch it, and enjoy it, because the thing is, there are people that, are tuning into the sport for the first time. They have no idea who any of these guys are. All they want to see is a good scrap. All they want to see is a competitive fight. And for the most part, the fights that we put on the network have been competitive for the most part. Yeah. But, again, I think David Morrell's going to be a star. So I think there are a lot of guys that are coming up that are putting themselves in position to be stars in 2022. Tank Davis, to me, is already a star. So, to say that he's, on the cusp of being a star would be foolish. He is a star. Yeah. And this is how I equate this. This is how I equate it. When stars from other sports give up their evenings to come and sit down and watch you perform, you're a star.
Well, we just talked about Tank. Is he about where you thought he would be at this stage of his career? You mentioned he's already a star. Is he on the path you expected him to take?
He's on the path, but I think, from my estimation, I think he's ahead of the curve on this thing. And you got to go back to guys like Roy Jones and Mike Tyson and guys like that who it didn't matter who they fought. People tuned in to see them fight. It's a singular performance. And that's the same thing that Canelo has. People don't necessarily tune in to see the opponent, but they tune in to see how, Tank is going to perform, to see how he's going to overcome a challenge. And he's challenging himself. It was a challenge for him to fight a guy that, was a last-minute replacement in Isaac Cruz. And a lot of guys don't like fighting guys at the last minute. They don't, and we say last minute, but they don't want to step up to that challenge. But he stepped up to the challenge of fighting a guy that's 140, that was a 140 pounder. And, Mario Barrios is a tough guy, is a very tough guy. And he stepped up to fight a guy who was tall and rangy and naturally outweighed him. And, people came up to see it, came out to see him. The guy fought in Atlanta twice, and then another promotional company thought you just could roll the balls out on the court and you would get a Tank Davis crowd, not realizing that Tank Davis drove that crowd. Wherever he goes, people follow, people flock to him. when he fought in Atlanta, when he fought Mario Barrios in Atlanta. My older nephew always comes to the fights in Atlanta, but he brought his son. It's like 15 years old, a football player, a baseball player, basketball. I mean, he's an athlete, right? Doesn't know Tank Davis from a hole in the wall. But when the baby walked Tank Davis out, he went nuts. Like my nephew sent me like the video of him going nuts in his seat when the baby walked Tank Davis out. And now he's a Tank Davis fan because the baby walked him out.
Mike is like, who's that?
Exactly. I didn't want to say it out loud
Google
though.
him. Google him.
I can imagine who he is. Yeah, it's smart.
Yeah, but
that's smart. That's smart marketing.
Yeah. So you're developing 15-year-old fans that love you because they love the athletes, or I mean the rappers that are walking you out.
Yeah.
And they come back to the next fight because they want to know who's the next rapper that's going to walk him out.
Yeah.
Now,
another big name in the PBC stable, Errol Spence Jr. recently said that he's returning in April, and it appears it'll be against Yordenis Ugas in what would be a great bout for 3 world titles. Can you shed any light on that potential match?
I think it's a great match. I think Ugas is an undervalued commodity at the welterweight division, and you could make an argument that Ugas handled Sean Porter with a lot more ease and lost the fight than Sean was handled in some of his other matches and everything. But I think it's a tremendous fight. I can't shed any light on the business side of it. But yeah, I think if that happens, then you got to give Errol Spence credit for stepping up. The guy is not taking on easy challenges despite the physical, the physical problems that he has encountered. The car accident, the detached retina, and he's coming back from all of that, and it appears he's been able to maintain his weight. And he's gone through, disciplining himself, and taking the sport seriously. And I think, there's a maturity level to him now that makes him formidable for anybody that wants to get in the ring with him. I think it's a tremendous fight. I think he and Ugas is a tremendous fight. There's enough mystery around how far Errol has come from his various injuries and ailments and stuff. And then there's enough intrigue around Ugas as to just how good is this guy. He made Manny Pacquiao retire. So I think it's a tremendous fight. And now the welterweight division, you're going to get a unified champion after that's all over. There's just one belt out there that's missing. So.
Well, speaking of that one belt, there is select the boxing fans who want to see Errol take on Terrence Crawford. What is hindering this fight from happening, in your opinion?
Economics. And you don't really want to insult a guy like Terrence Crawford, who's a tremendous talent. And I'm not taking away anything from his talent, but he hasn't been built into a pay-per-view star. And I'm not saying that to throw shade at the guy, but you got to go on his track record. You got to go and look at what he's done, in the pay-per-view fights that he's been at, been involved in. And, that it's not my job to tell anybody how to make him a pay-per-view star. We have enough work on our hands dealing with, trying to make our own guys into pay-per-view stars, but he just hasn't been built. And trust me, if there is money in him fighting Errol Spence where he could get what he wants and Errol could get what he wants, that fight would get made. But you don't want to insult the guy. Nobody wants to insult this guy and make him an offer that's insulting. Nobody wants to do that. Like I said, he's a proud champion, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that to him. But from a business standpoint, it's a fight that, might excite the fans and all these people that are out there yelling about pay-per-view and too much they're not buying it anyway. They're not going to plop down any money to make it, successful. They're going to steal the fight, but, they're not going to support it on pay-per-view, and the numbers, won't be enough to give him what he needs, or not necessarily what he needs, but what he wants. And I don't know what that number is, but I would think that number, would be very high. I'm not involved in those talks, but that's just looking at the sport historically. I just don't, and I don't think he should be insulted. I really don't.
Tim, what can you tell us about Deontay Wilder's future? He lost that fight to Tyson Fury, but boy, did he put on a show.
Yeah. The boy's got a big heart, man. Or should I say the man's got a big heart. But, we're both from the South, me and him, so I can say the boy's got a big heart. But when you look at the heavyweight division, it screams for excitement. It screams for somebody that's going to bring a thrill to the ring, the high wire act, and that's Deontay. And there's still great fights out there for Deontay. There's Andy Ruiz, there's Anthony Joshua, there's Usyk. I mean, there's still fights out there. When you look at the heavyweight division, you got to put him in the top 4, the top 5, in terms of marketability, in terms of just his electrifying ability to just knock people out in a single fight. And he's a gate attraction. I mean, nobody, hey, God bless Tyson Fury, but nobody's coming to see Tyson Fury as a gate attraction unless he's fighting Deontay Wilder. No one. Maybe in England, if he fights Anthony Joshua, that'll be a gate attraction. Maybe if he fights Usyk over there, it's a gate attraction. But in America, who's coming to see Tyson Fury fight anybody other than Deontay Wilder? And over here, who's coming to see any of those guys fight anybody other than Deontay Wilder? And so he's still viable. I mean, it's up to him to determine, when he's had enough rest and when he wants to come back. It was a brutal fight, and he really needs to take some time off and recharge his batteries and get himself back together. He's never really out of shape in terms of he's blessed with some incredible DNA in terms of just his physical stature. I wish I burned calories and my metabolism was like him, and my physical structure was like his. I'm not blessed with muscles on top of muscles. I'm blessed with fat on top of fat. But yeah, I think there are at least 3 viable fights out there for him if he decides to come back, and they're all going to be pay-per-view, and they're all going to be big money fights. Does he ease back in and just fight somebody? Go down the column A, column B from the guys that were on display on January 1st. Does he do that? The winners from those, well, he's already beaten Ortiz, he's beaten Gerald Washington, but I think that there are guys out there if he wants to come back and, have a comeback fight. But I don't think he's of that mentality. I think he wants to get back in the ring in a big fight, in a big promotion, and, and do his thing. So we'll see. We'll see what he does.
We will. Tim, finally, looking back at 2021, how would you rate the year in terms of the entertainment value of the fights PBC put on? Did it compare with the pre-pandemic world of 2019 and before the pandemic?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it compared, and I think it's an unfair comparison because, we were able to get crowds to fights, and we were able to get our stars unharnessed and out there. And look, we didn't have Keith Thurman fighting, we didn't have Errol Spence fighting. We had Danny Garcia fighting early in the year. We lost Jared Hurd to Jake Paul. But Stephen Fulton got an opportunity to shine. David Morrell got an opportunity to shine. Jesus Ramos got an opportunity to shine. Vito Melnicki got an opportunity to shine. He had a loss and he came back, and he didn't avenge the loss, but he came back and acquitted himself. Joey Spencer looks like he's coming to his hand strength. So, look, the guys that are out there toiling away, they got an opportunity to step up. Your Dennis Ugas, got an opportunity to make a historic fight and send Manny Pacquiao into retirement. So yeah, the fights that we did have, there was great entertainment value in those fights. Both the Charlos fought in 50-50 fights. We had some of our stars out there. Deontay Wilder proved his mettle, showed his heart. It wasn't as great as anything we did pre-pandemic, but it was pretty darn good considering the circumstances that we had earlier in the year. So I'm going to leave it there.
Very good. Tim, thanks for taking the time to impart your wisdom on us. It's always appreciated.
I don't know about all that, but anytime you guys need me, I'm willing to come on. I don't know how much wisdom I'm imparting, but I love talking to you guys because, I have a lot of respect for you.
Likewise.
So.
That's going to do it for this week's show. We want to thank Mario Barrios and Tim Smith for dropping by. And thank you guys for listening. Be sure to check us out next week for more interviews and Shooting the Boxing Breeze right here on the PBC podcast.